In this presentation, you will learn all about the Frankfurt School. Before understanding Frankfurt School, let us first learn about what a school is. A school in layperson's language is a secondary group that helps in an individual's socialization. It plays an important role in the development of the child and society at large. However, here the meaning refers to an institution where scholars come together and work on a specific area. These schools produce a body of work that further leads to the development of the discipline. It helps in bringing further discussion, debates with the work they produced, etc. It is only then a random university or institute that qualifies to be called a school. A school is viewed as more serious than just a department in a university. It is also seen as an important body and has a say in the discipline. Generally, the school is built around a university or even associated with a particular study location. For example, in urban sociology, there are two dominant schools, that is Los Angeles School and Chicago School of Sociology. Origin of Frankfurt School. The development of the Frankfurt School is closely associated with the Institute of Social Research at Goethe University, Frankfurt. The institute was founded in the early 1920s to promote radical intellectual ideas not controlled by traditional Marxist and social democratic parties or academic disciplines. Over time, several universities' research capacities had developed through research commissions and third-party funds, particularly in Cologne, Frankfurt, Berlin, and Göttingen in the 1950s. With this, the new Frankfurt School began with the help of Marx, Horkheimer, and Theodor W. Adorno. The Frankfurt School remained consciously critical and even dismissive of American sociology and used selected Marxist and Freudian categories as a theoretical foundation for analyzing contemporary society. The Frankfurt School is an influential school of thought that helped bring continental philosophy and German intellectual traditions to America. This school was associated with Frankfurt University in the 1920s and early 1930s, and again in the 1950s through the 1960s. The Frankfurt School thinkers produced an innovative blend of radical philosophy and social science. The Frankfurt School was a tight network of independent radical philosophers, economists, and sociologists associated with the German Institute for Social Research, essentially a Marxist think tank funded by a German millionaire grain merchant. The Frankfurt School provides rich material for the sociology of knowledge. It is an example of how a once marginal school of thought gained widespread influence and crossed the boundaries between disciplines, social movements, psychoanalysis, Marxism, and national tradition. Marxism is an interdisciplinary subject that can be connected with any discipline. Here, even Frankfurt School was influenced by it. The Frankfurt School developed through many difficulties where they had to constantly keep on moving due to the war happening in the countries. However, they added to it and shaped it according to their belief systems. Frankfurt School is associated with Adorno, Horkheimer, Marcus, Erich Fromm, Ludge, Benjamin, Rocker. Frankfurt School versus Cultural Studies. Both Frankfurt School and British cultural studies were influenced by Gramsci's critique of the dominant mode of culture and media, and it provided valuable tools for cultural criticism. Lucas and Bloch developed the concepts of ideology, utopia, and historical materialist cultural analysis that influenced the trajectory of Frankfurt School cultural studies. Thus, the work of the Frankfurt School has been central in establishing the basis for critical cultural studies. Equally important to the history of cultural studies and social theory is the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, CCCS, or the Birmingham School, established at the University of Birmingham, England in the 1960s. In contrast to what many now see as the overly elitist perspective of the Frankfurt School, members of the CCCS offer theories of popular culture and the media that combined elements of Marxism, post-structuralism, feminist analysis, semiology, and many other perspectives. The views of both these schools are addressed in entries on cultures such as media critique, television and social theory, cultural Marxism, and British cultural studies, and many others. Culture industry. The culture industry produced consumers who could consume its products and conform to the dictates and the behaviors of the existing society. The culture industry thesis described both the production of massified cultural products and homogenized subjectivities. Mass culture produced dreams, hopes, fears, and longings for the Frankfurt School and an eternal desire for consumer products. Walter Benjamin also pointed out that the culture industry also produces rational and critical consumers able to dissect and discriminate among cultural texts and performances, much as sports fans learn to analyze and criticize sports events. Let us take an example of a mall. You see the same brand everywhere. The malls are homogeneous too, with the same set of shops. Buying a displayed product becomes more of an inspiration. It's tempting too. At times, even it's a goal that keeps one going. So here we are sold to the idea of an industry that designs it for that. Let us take another example of French fries and burgers. We know it's unhealthy due to heavy oil, bread, etc., than plain vegetables, yet we tend to buy it. In other words, we are not buying food, but we are paying for unhealthy food. So, how this happens is through the culture industry. When everyone is eating, you would also be tempted to eat. It's a psychological mechanism that operates the fear of missing out. View on mass culture. The Frankfurt School theorists were among the first neo Marxian groups to examine the effects of mass culture and the rise of consumer society on the working classes that were to be the instrument of revolution in the classical Marxian scenario. They also analyzed how the culture industries and consumer society were stabilizing contemporary capitalism and accordingly sought new political change strategies, political transformation agencies, and models for political emancipation that could serve as norms of social critique and goals for political struggle. This project required rethinking Marxian theory and produced many important contributions as well as some problematical positions. Frankfurt School tended, with some exceptions, to conceptualize mass culture as a homogeneous and potent form of ideological domination. For the Frankfurt School, mass culture and communications, therefore, stand in the center of leisure activity, are important agents of socialization, and mediators of political happenings. Frankfurt School played an important role in understanding the institutions of contemporary societies. Frankfurt School viewed individual thought and action as the motors of social and cultural progress. Instead, giant organizations and institutions overpowered individuals. The era corresponds to the staid, conformist, and conservative world of corporate capitalism that was dominant in the 1950s with its organization of men and women, its mass consumption, and its mass culture. View on technology. The Frankfurt School focused intently on culture and technology, indicating how technology became a major production force and formative mode of social organization and control. In a 1941 article, Some Social Implications of Modern Technology, Herbert Marcuse argued that technology in the contemporary era constitutes an entire mode of organizing and perpetuating social relationships, a manifestation of prevalent thought and behavior patterns, an instrument for control and domination. In the realm of culture, technology produced a mass culture that habituated individuals to conform to the dominant patterns of thought and behavior and thus provided powerful social control and domination. The point addressed by the Frankfurt School could be seen very much true in today's time. We could observe the impact of social media on our lives. The time spent outdoor playing has reduced due to heavy use of mobile phones by children. This has led to change in habits like instant gratification demands. In a way, technology has been using behavioral psychology to capture the young and old one's attention, and it affects everyone immensely. It at times creates a world of artificial reality. Though technology has a positive side too, to some extent. View on media. Habermas noted that in the period of the democratic revolutions, a public sphere emerged. For the first time in history, ordinary citizens could participate in political discussions and debates and organize and struggle against unjust authority. Habermas's account also points to the media's increasingly important role in politics and everyday life and how corporate interests have colonized this sphere, using the media and culture to promote their interests. Criticism of the American Dream. When Frankfurt School had reached the United States during the war, the members of the Frankfurt School came to believe that American mass culture was also highly ideological and worked to promote the interests of American capitalism. Controlled by giant corporations, the culture industries were organized according to the strictures of mass production, churning out mass produced products that generated a highly commercial system of culture, which in turn sold the values, lifestyles, and institutions of the American way of life. For example, in several parts of the world, a student has to take loans to complete his degree. After that, again, loans to build a house, to buy a car. The cost of living is expensive. It gives them the reason to run after the American dream of having a house and luxurious life, which leads to discontent living all their lives. The whole life looks like a chase. Let us take one more example. The companies which sell luxurious products have high margin earnings. As in a luxury product, the cost of the product may be the same, but the marketing is like it is unique, limited edition, etc. People also do not bargain with a luxury product as it looks cheap. So the profit here is made by the company who sells it. The buyer is just buying the idea or feeling it. Observation on the transition in society. The Frankfurt School also provides useful historical perspectives on the transition from traditional culture and modernism in the arts to a mass produced media and consumer society. In his path breaking book, The Structural Transformation of the Public Sphere, Jürgen Habermas historicized Adorno and Horkheimer's analysis of the culture industry. Providing historical background to the triumph of the cultural industry, Habermas notes how bourgeois society in the late 18th and early 19th centuries was distinguished by the rise of a public sphere that stood between civil society and the state and mediated between public and private interests. For the first time in history, individuals and groups could shape public opinion, directly expressing their needs and interests while influencing political practice. The bourgeois public sphere made it possible to form a realm of public opinion that opposed state power and the powerful interests that were coming to shape bourgeois society. Publications from Frankfurt School. Let us look at the important works. Traditional and Critical Theory by Max Horkheimer. Dialectic of Enlightenment, Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno. Critique of Instrumental Reason, Max Horkheimer. The Authoritarian Personality, Theodor Adorno. Aesthetic Theory, Theodor Adorno. Culture Industry Reconsidered, Theodor Adorno. One-Dimensional Man, Herbert Marcuse. The Aesthetic Dimension Toward a Critique of Marxist Aesthetics, Herbert Marcuse. The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, Walter Benjamin. Structural Transformation and the Public Sphere, Jürgen Habermas. Towards a Rational Society by Jürgen Habermas. Phases of development of Frankfurt School. Frankfurt School could be viewed from three phases. First phase, here they criticized positivism. They criticized the cultural theory. They took forward the Marxist tradition. They have blended the Freudian theory, criticized the advance of capitalism. The Institute made major contributions in two areas relating to the possibility of rational human subjects, that is, individuals who could act rationally to take charge of their society and history. The first consisted of social phenomena previously considered in Marxism as part of the superstructure or as ideology, personality, family, and authority structures, and the realm of aesthetics and mass culture. Studies saw a common concern here in the ability of capitalism to destroy the preconditions of critical revolutionary consciousness. This meant arriving at a sophisticated awareness of the depth dimension in which social oppression sustains itself. It also meant the beginning of critical theory's recognition of ideology as part of the foundations of social structure. The second phase of Frankfurt School, critical theory, focuses on two works that rank as classics of 20th century thought: Horkheimer and Adorno's Dialectic of Enlightenment and Adorno's Minima Moralia. The authors wrote both works during the Institute's American exile in the Nazi period. While retaining much of the Marxian analysis in these works, critical theory has shifted its emphasis. The critique of capitalism has turned into a critique of Western civilization as a whole. Indeed, the dialectic of enlightenment uses the Odyssey as a paradigm for the analysis of bourgeois consciousness. Horkheimer and Adorno already present in these works many themes that have come to dominate the social thought of recent years. For example, nature's domination appears central to a Western civilization long before ecology had become a catchphrase of the day. The third phase. In the third phase of the Frankfurt School, which coincided with the post war period, particularly from the early 1950s to middle 1960s, with the growth of advanced industrial society under Cold War conditions, the critical theorists recognized that the structure of capitalism and history had changed decisively, that the modes of oppression operated differently, and that the industrial working class no longer remained the determinate negation of capitalism. This led to the attempt to root the debate in an absolute method of negativity, as in Marcuse's one-dimensional man and Adorno's negative dialectics. During this period, the Institute of Social Research resettled in Frankfurt with the task not merely of continuing its research, but of becoming a leading force in sociological education and democratization of West Germany. This led to a certain systemization of the Institute's entire accumulation of empirical research and theoretical analysis. Critics of the Frankfurt School. Several groups criticized the Frankfurt School. Like some said that the theoretical assumptions of Marx and Freud had inherent problems, including the lack of understanding of the spiritual element, which limited their framework of interpretation. Although Frankfurt theorists delivered criticisms against the theories and practices of their days, they did not present any positive alternatives. Some scholars saw the intellectual perspective of the Frankfurt School as a really romantic, elitist critique of mass culture covered in neo Marxist clothing. They saw that the Frankfurt School labeled certain forms and rejected certain forms. On the other hand, they could also be biased towards some cultural artifacts themselves. Another criticism originating from the left was that critical theory was a form of bourgeois idealism with no inherent relation to the political practice and is isolated from any ongoing revolutionary movement. Thank you for watching the presentation. I hope you now have a better understanding of the Frankfurt School.